And video games are a real problem. They're a real problem. You know why? Because they're fucking fun. And you do them and they're real exciting, but you don't get anywhere. You could learn jiu-jitsu. You get obsessed by jiu-jitsu. And then 3 years later, you're like an elite jiu-jitsu athlete. You're thinking like, I might be able to open my own school one day.
You got confidence.
Yeah, if I have 100 students and those 100 students are paying me X amount of dollars per month, I can make a living. Or you could just be playing fucking video games. 3 years later, you could be that same kid and you're going to waste your time.
Video games are an almost essential part of modern life. And yet there still seems, among society, to be a large amount of fear and hysteria about the potential harmful effects video games can have. Speeches like those from Joe Rogan you heard are not uncommon at all in media discussions of video games. In fact, for a lot of the generation born before the 1980s who missed the proverbial video game train, video games are still a source of confusion, suspicion, and honestly, ignorance. But when we address criticisms of gaming, we have to be careful of always attributing it to ignorance. In the case of Rogan, for example, he's himself played video games to the point of a self-professed addiction. So what is going on here? What is making him come down so hard on the thing he seems to enjoy so much? Are video games still that thing that parents should stop their kids from playing, or is the issue overblown? Well, to answer these questions, I think we need to have a talk about video games. To address these issues properly, I'm going to split this video up into 3 parts. The first part will address the perception of video games. The second, the science behind it. And the third and final part will present what I hope will be a more balanced perspective on gaming that we can all potentially adopt. After that, it will be up to you to judge what you believe to be true or not. So, to start off, let's talk about perception. One of the reasons that gaming and those who frequently indulge in it, often referred to as gamers, have such a bad rep is because depictions of them in popular media tend to be generally very negative. Most representations of gamers, whether that be in films and TV, or just news and political discussions, have them pictured as outcasts, weirdos, or generally, people who aren't socially well adjusted in the least bit.
Adios, turd nuggets!
Take for example, the most popular and well-known on-screen representation of gamers, The Big Bang Theory. Even in a show like this, which is meant to speak from the perspective of gamer nerds, the depiction of the gamers themselves is one that is largely unflattering. Sure, we're meant to like Sheldon, Raj, Howard and Leonard, but to be blunt, we're also supposed to see them as losers.
Hey guys, my friends and I got tired of dancing, so we came over to have sex with you.
Download the rush, jump in the tank! We said no tanks! There are no rules in hell! Son of a big med pack! I need a med pack!
Told ya.
They're awkward, highly insular, and struggle to interact with other human beings, particularly women. In some cases, having a physical inability to speak to them, most obviously demonstrated by Raj's character, who cannot speak to women unless he's drunk.
Well, hi, cutie pie. I was hoping you'd show up.
What is presented on screen here is also what aligns with most people's idea of what a gamer is. We are meant to see this as a roughly accurate portrayal of a certain type of person. And whenever TV shows specifically touch on the topic of gaming, these representations only get worse. In one episode of The Big Bang Theory, for example, Penny tries her hand at a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, Age of Conan. But far from it being a positive experience for her, she ends up falling victim to the great danger that is gaming, and it basically starts ruining her life. She stops dating, keeping her hygiene, or even going to work, in favor of an unfiltered pursuit of gaming.
Shouldn't you be at work?
I don't work on Mondays.
It's Thursday.
In reality, what Penny is really falling victim to here is addiction. And the flawed idea that gaming and gaming addiction are synonymous with one another is a frequently misused fear that critics of gaming exploit. But we will return to that issue later. For now, I do want to stop for a second to point out what it is that eventually snaps Penny out of her addiction. It's not the understanding of a healthy balance between her hobbies and her other pursuits, nor is it the warnings of her concerned friends. No, what makes Penny realize how horrible her state has become is her realization that gaming is actually bringing her closer to a person like Howard, someone she deems to be disgusting. This revelation is what eventually overrides her desire to pursue gaming any further.
Who are you?
It is I, Sir Howard of Wallowitz. Can I interest you in an afternoon of spirited questing, followed by a flagon of ale at yon virtual tavern?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Oh my god, I need help.
What we are to take away from the ending of this episode is that only when realizing that gaming is bringing her closer to gamers and making her one of them, that Penny decides that gaming is bad. She's frightened that inhabiting this world has lowered her standards so much that she would sink down to Howard's level and accept his romantic advances, despite how she normally deems him to be repulsive. Gamers, simply put, are people you don't want to be like or even associated with, according to the Big Bang Theory. Other shows such as South Park have echoed these kinds of statements before, depicting gamers as unhealthy, unsympathetic losers who game because they really don't have a shot in making friends or living a normal life. Gaming provides them with an outlet to achieve something they deem worthwhile because they otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Yes! Yeah! We did it, you guys.
One of their most famous episodes, in which they parody World of Warcraft, one of the most popular video games of all time, is a typical example of this. And while it is obviously a comedy, and while yes, shows like South Park will poke fun at everything, what should be noted here is that both these representations are saying the same thing. When we talk about gaming in popular culture, we're very rarely given a full spectrum. We generally tend to get only one narrative, that which I've just discussed. Gaming equals bad, gamers equal losers. And when any set of people are only ever depicted as being one type of way, it creates a perception in the mind of the rest of the population that this is probably what they're all like. We know, for example, that Penny from Big Bang Theory is not representative of all waitresses, because not only have we seen plenty of other different waitress characters in films and TV shows, but also because we all interact with service workers all the time. If you don't know any quote-unquote gamers and you're a worried parent, why on earth would you doubt that gamers aren't exactly like you've always seen them on screen? Surely there must be some truth to all that, right? Well, this is where we must update our understanding, because the truth couldn't be further from this. If anything, this is one of the reasons we need to stop using the term gamer as often as we do, though I will use it copiously in this video like a true hypocrite. The term gamer implies that gaming is part of someone's self-identity, or that it attributes them to a certain set of people. While some gamers might feel that way, the truth is that playing video games is just a normal activity. It's something that literally anyone can do, and almost everyone does do. When I was in school, it was a point of shame to admit that you liked gaming. But thankfully, those days are long gone. Gaming is now seen, at least amongst younger generations, as just a regular activity. You can spend a few minutes every day doing it, or you can spend hours. You can do it casually, or with the intent of making it your job. When games are being played in both the palms of our hands and on expensive supercomputers, when it's an activity that people from the age of 1 to 100 can do, then trying to categorize all these different people under the one umbrella term of gamers just seems silly. It's like trying to categorize all TV viewers as TVers. It makes no sense. And it's because of this growth in scope that now, gaming doesn't have to define your lifestyle either. You don't have to be pigeonholed into a certain way of thinking. We've seen famous celebrities talk about how much they love gaming, like Snoop Dogg, Megan Fox, and most recently Henry Cavill, whose video of him assembling his own PC went viral and made plenty of gaming enthusiasts swoon and crush. In reality though, we shouldn't even need examples like this. If you look around, you will see that gamers are everywhere, not as some sort of plague, but as people. There are gamers who are athletes, gamers who are gym rats, gamers who are musicians, and gamers who have kids and grandkids and a well-paying job and a happy, well-adjusted life. The problem is that, like I said, depictions of gaming haven't evolved with the medium itself. And while people tend to focus on the pitfalls, they haven't learned to appreciate all the healthy ways in which gaming actually promotes social interaction and personal growth. Thankfully, recent studies have started to combat this by looking at the actual effects gaming has on those who indulge in it. So it's time now to look at the science. In the same way that video games and those who play them cannot be simplified in one fell swoop, I cannot generalize their various pros and cons either. It would be hypocritical of me to say all games are good for you when they come in so many different shapes and forms. But I would like to highlight some fascinating findings that I encountered during my research on this topic, a lot of which goes against common wisdom. Let's start with the genre of games which usually receives the heaviest criticism from those unconvinced about the enterprise of gaming: action video games. action, fighting, and first-person shooter games are often the first to receive negative press because of the common theme between them all: violence. Any discussions on the effects of gaming will surely come around to this topic, so it's best we get it out the way first. While the common public understanding has usually been that violent video games will result in violent behavior, recent studies have shown this to just not be true. Older studies, which presented this myth as fact, tended to focus on flawed methodology and publication bias. The most famous of these studies was conducted by Anderson et al. In 2010, and it is often cited by people who seek to attack gaming. The study argued that teens who play video games are more likely to show signs of violent behavior. The problem with this study, and many others like it, was that it was A, based on self-reported assessments which were incredibly unreliable, B, focused on non-serious forms of aggression such as using aggressive words, and perhaps most importantly, it was completely devoid from the real world. It didn't try to assess what impact video games actually had on the teens in their everyday lives. This is where more recent research has shifted its focus to, and this is where the results have been surprising to many. A new study conducted in February 2019 by researchers at the University of Oxford assessed over 1,000 British adolescents and found that there is no correlation between violent video games and aggressive behavior. The study has been seen by many institutions as the most comprehensive till date on the topic, not just because of its size and scope, but because its methodology is a lot more bulletproof. The conclusion here was pretty emphatic. Another study by Kuhn et al., which actually tested the behavior of various people when exposed to video games, found the same conclusion as the Oxford study. They gave participants one of three conditions. One set of participants played the violent video game GTA, one set played the non-violent game Sims, and a final set of participants played no games at all. They followed these participants for a time period of 2 months. At the end of that period, they concluded that there was no significant differences between any of the groups when it came to aggressive, bigoted, or toxic behavior. In truth, even without amazing studies like these, the idea that video games are making children violent doesn't hold up under the slightest amount of factual scrutiny. Consider that according to research, over 90% of kids play video games, and this number and the amount of time spent playing video games has been steadily increasing for the last several decades. And yet, statistics of youth crimes and particularly violent crimes are constantly on a downward trajectory in the countries where these games are most played. In the UK, for example, youth crime has gone down by 77% over the last 10 years. In America, violent crimes among youth have steadily decreased since 1996, even as video game sales have soared. And this, despite the fact that the overall prison populations in America have continued to skyrocket. So how is it possible for people to still claim that video games are making people more violent when there's less violence being committed by people of the video game generation? No, this is one of those myths that really needs to end. Of course, some people who play video games will commit violent acts, just the same way as someone reading a violent book might do the same. It's much less to do with the media itself, and more to do with the individual. And once we look past this cloud of fear-mongering, we might see that there are actually a lot of benefits to gaming as well. For example, video games might actually be very helpful in getting science degrees. I kid you not. Multiple studies have found that shooter games help people build spatial skills, improve attention allocation, and provide enhanced mental rotation abilities. A meta-analysis by Utelet et al. Actually concluded that even for people who don't ordinarily play video games, the improvement derived from playing commercially available shooter video games are comparable to the effects of formal high school and university level courses aimed at enhancing these same skills. So that means that a video game like Call of Duty might be as good as a university course at teaching you those skills I mentioned earlier. And if you're wondering what good spatial skills and mental rotation means in the real world, a study which looked at over 50 years of research and was conducted over an 11-year period concluded that spatial ability plays a critical role in developing expertise in STEM and suggests, among other things, that including spatial ability in modern talent searches would identify many adolescents with potential for STEM who are currently being missed. What does this mean in normal terms? Well, it means that according to this study, if colleges and universities were to look for people with good spatial skills, they would very likely find excellent candidates for degrees in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. So if shooter games are actively building these skills, then that seems like an important benefit to consider when we talk about their pros and cons. Furthermore, these benefits are not flimsy either. Again, research has shown that spatial skills can be trained with video games in a relatively brief period, and that these training benefits last over an extended period of time. And crucially, these skills transfer to other spatial tasks outside of the video game context. Now, I'm not going to be facetious and suggest that playing video games all day will help you become a genius scientist. Sorry kid, doesn't work that way. What I'm trying to illustrate here is that findings like these are completely missing from our narrative today when we talk about video games. We're always told that they're bad and harmful, and even those who aren't actively against them tend to see them as just a lazy pastime. But if even a little bit of video gaming can provide significant and lasting improvement in certain cognitive abilities, then why is that being ignored? In many ways, we need to change the narrative to see video games as we do reading books or doing a Sudoku puzzle, something that can be both fun while also expanding your mind and sharpening your skills. Speaking of puzzles, what I just listed above does not apply to puzzle games. They will not help you build spatial skills, and like I said at the start of the section, I'm not going to be dishonest and suggest that all video games will have the same effect on you. Games like role-playing and strategy games actually have a different set of benefits. A study by Adachi and Willoughby in 2013 found that adolescents who played more strategy games than their peers reported higher problem-solving skills the following year. The researchers also went on to say that this means that strategy games had an indirect link to achieving better grades, since higher problem-solving skills was in turn linked with higher academic grades. So to summarize, strategy games improve your problem solving, and kids with good problem solving also happen to be the ones who achieve the best grades. Hardly seems like a bad thing. In a study by Moffat et al. In 2017, all genres of gaming were found to have benefits for creativity in young adults, but particularly so in problem solving games. In this study, they assessed young adults for creative thinking using the Torrance tests, before and right after 30 minutes of playing a computer game. The kids were asked to play either Serious Sam, a shooter game, Portal 2, a problem-solving game, or Minecraft, a sandbox game which involves building and destroying whatever the player wishes. The researchers found that gains in creativity occurred for all three types of computer games, but was the greatest for Portal 2. This study shows that even a short period of video gaming can put one, at least temporarily, into a highly creative frame of mind. If you've played games like Portal, you probably won't be surprised at hearing this outcome. Though again, video games are often generalized as being full of violence and lacking nuance, there are a whole host of games that are wonderfully challenging to the mind of the player. In Portal, for example, your character controls a gun, not one that shoots bullets, but instead openings to a portal. You can create a maximum of 2 portals at any given time, both of which connect to one another. Players are then put inside a room, which requires them to use the simple premise to manipulate the environment around them and find a way out into the next room. By its very design, the game requires you to expand your mind and think of new and ingenious ways of solving problems. And even when video games don't explicitly ask for this, like Portal does, most of them do reward thinking outside the box and will feature some element of problem-solving challenges. It should be no surprise then that studies have consistently found the same results. In 2012, researchers Jackson et al. Found that among a sample of roughly 500 students aged 12, all forms of video game playing was positively associated with creativity. Importantly, usage of other forms of technology did not have the same effect. So using your phone, the internet, or just generally being on the computer, none of that had the same benefits. Clearly, there is something in video games that is actively improving the ability of children to come up with new ideas. The researchers of this study, though, actually became worried about the implications of their findings. They were concerned that their research might be misused by people to further their own agendas. So in 2015, they conducted another study, hoping they might be wrong, and concluded that video games most definitely benefit creativity, as well as having other cognitive, social, emotional, and motivational benefits. At this point, I could go on and on about other benefits that various genres of video game playing have been demonstrated to provide. I can tell you about how games can actually promote helpful and social behavior outside of the game itself. I can tell you about how they combat anxiety. I can tell you how they actually improve your eyesight. Yes, improve, which is the opposite of what most grandmas will tell you. I can tell you about how video games are being used to help children with cancer cope with and understand their illness. I could even share with you the story about how scientists use an online video game to find a solution to combat an AIDS-like virus that they had struggled to solve for over 10 years before that. Imagine, it took gamers 3 weeks to come together and solve something scientists were working on for 10 years using just an online video game. And if you want to know about all these things, I will link these and every source I've used in the video in the description. In truth, when I started to make this video, I actively searched for studies and research that showed the negative effects of gaming. I literally typed in negative effects of gaming, and I struggled to find A, things that weren't just clickbait articles from scaremongering websites, but also B, reliable studies that hadn't been debunked or flawed from the outset. But by now, if the science hasn't convinced you, no further amount of fact recounting from me will do so. So instead, I'd like to now focus on the more human aspect of it all. I think this quote from researcher Isabella Granick is particularly poignant in addressing the narrative around gaming in general. She says, if playing video games simply makes people happier, this seems to be a fundamental emotional benefit to consider. Indeed, amongst all the hysteria, I think it can be lost that the greatest thing about gaming is that it makes people happy. The horizons are literally limitless in gaming. Whether you want to discover new worlds and explore wild fantasies, or look at our own world through a different lens. Whether you want to be immersed in a wonderful storyline, or whether you want to create your own. Whether you play for the thrill of competition, or whether you play just to mess around. Gaming can be a source of joy for any and everyone. And it doesn't just stop within the gaming world itself. Gaming has the incredible ability to bring people together. As games get more global and more interactive, the room for making friends and building communities is ever expanding. I myself have made dozens of amazing friends from gaming and have literally thousands of people who I am grateful to be able to call my community. The majority of people playing video games online will tell you that they've had similar experiences. Yes, of course there is toxicity, of course there are horrible people, but that's more a symptom of the internet and, well, people. There is so much joy to be had from gaming and building communities within it, with people who share your passions and want to spread happiness with you. I highly recommend that those of you who haven't tried it to at least speak to someone who has been involved in the gaming community. No doubt they will tell you of all the amazing memories they've made that you might not even have thought possible to do online. And let's not forget that for many people, gaming and the communities around it were and are some of the only ways for them to make friends and have meaningful social interactions. Whether it's because of physical limitations, social anxiety, odd working hours, geographical constraints, or mental health concerns, there are so many people who cannot always leave their home to make friends in person or just find it difficult. And so many people like this have been able to find friends in a social outlet through gaming that they otherwise would not have had access to. Particularly in the age of COVID-19, I think we've all gotten a taste of this. Trapped inside for our own safety, gaming has still provided a great outlet for millions of people around the world to stay connected with their friends and still be able to share fun and meaningful experiences together, even if they are in a virtual world. Once you've experienced something like this and communities like these, you start to realize the incredible opportunities that gaming can give. And you also realize that it can impact people in ways you'd have never imagined. At this point, I'd like to share a personal story that was told to me by one of my followers. A while back, I sent out a tweet asking for people to share with me how gaming has impacted their life. One follower who goes by the name of Gil shared this beautiful story which they've kindly given permission for me to share with you. It involves the game Monster Hunter World, which is an action game where players collect loot and make awesome gear for themselves in order to go and hunt bigger and bigger monsters. He says, "In September 2018, my wife and I were expecting our first baby, a daughter. When she bought me Monster Hunter World for an early birthday gift, I made the custom character to represent the daughter we were expecting. When she miscarried a few weeks later, we were devastated. In the moments when we weren't just holding each other and crying, I kept going back to Monster Hunter, because the character in-game meant somehow that I hadn't lost my daughter completely, I guess. The game helped me cope with the loss, and 770 plus hours later, my daughter exists in some way as a badass monster-slaying warrior queen. In the moments where it gets hard to cope again, when I'm jealous of other couples having successful births, the game still helps me cope with the pain." At this point, I would like to return to Joe Rogan's statement that we looked at the start of the video, about gaming being a waste of time.
You're going to waste your time.
I address this not to pick on him particularly, but because his thoughts mirror those of a large number of people when they think about the impact of gaming. One of Rogan's central criticisms is that the time spent gaming could be spent, for example, learning a martial art and becoming a purple belt and starting your own dojo. In the first instance, this logic is flawed. Not everyone learning martial arts for 3 years becomes a purple belt who owns their successful business. In fact, many never progress at all. There are plenty of people who dedicate themselves to a martial art or a musical instrument, or to learn a language for several years and never see significant improvement. On the flip side, several 100,000 people around the world do make money playing video games, myself included. And it is an industry so rapidly growing that even 2 years ago, I myself wouldn't have thought it personally viable. But for so many people, and not just me, it is now an accessible and achievable goal. Beyond just the financial aspects though, we've spoken already about the various health benefits gaming can provide. Of course, this doesn't mean I'm advocating that we see gaming as a health exercise like we might see jogging or going to the gym. But as I mentioned once already, I think we need to shift our perspective to view gaming much the way we do activities like doing a Sudoku puzzle, or reading a book, or even watching a film. For many, these are activities for fun and relaxation. For some, reading a book or watching a movie can expand your mind and inspire you to do great things. And for others, they might read a book on economics or politics, or do a crossword puzzle to keep their mind sharp and improve themselves in a certain aspect of their lives. Gaming is much the same. Some approach it for fun, others for inspiration or perhaps a profession, and some approach it as a way of sharpening their mind and keeping themselves on their toes. What Rogan does allude to though, and what is a valid point that I would like to conclude the video by addressing, is the issue of gaming addiction. Rogan himself clearly seems to suffer from some form of it, and it is understandable that he is consequently quite negative in his portrayal of video games in this particular podcast.
Where I know one day I played until it was sunlight,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting there, my hands are sweating, I'm all fucking caffeinated up, I've been drinking Mountain Dew for the past 8 hours, and I realized, I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not where I want to be with my life, and I'm just sitting here playing video games all the time, and there's no future in this.
Similarly, many concerned figures such as parents of children who game often worry about this danger in particular. The problem with discussing this issue is that it's already heavily polarized. For critics of gaming, this is the one weapon that is always wielded against it. It is the example always referred to try and stop people from gaming. It's often incorrectly presented as the bleak destination that everyone on the path of gaming will inevitably reach, like it were some life-consuming drug. For gaming enthusiasts, these criticisms have been heard so often and so often incorrectly that they've ceased to acknowledge it's a problem at all. They've ignored the existence of the issue full stop, and ironically, it's made them more susceptible to it themselves. Gaming addiction is definitely real. It affects anywhere between 2 and 12% of young gamers, depending on which metric you use to define addiction and also which genre you're referring to, with MMORPG players showing the greatest likelihood of getting addicted. But again, overblowing the issue is not helpful. Addiction is not exclusive to gaming, and again, it's been shown that in terms of neural responses, gaming addiction works much like substance abuse. So we must combat it like we do any form of addiction. We must help those around us recognize when their passion is becoming an obsession and when their life and mental health is increasingly taking a backseat for something that seems to be getting further and further out of their control. For those of us who are passionate about gaming, it is a matter of keeping ourselves in check and maintaining a healthy balance between engaging in an activity we love, but also taking the time to do things that provide our bodies with what gaming cannot always: exercise, fresh air, and different forms of mental stimulation. This is perhaps best summed up by a study called On the Costs and Benefits of Gaming, the Role of Passion, which, as the title suggests, attempts to look at the pros and cons of gaming through the lens of passion. This study argues for a dualistic model of passion, where one can have either a harmonious or obsessive passion with an activity they value and want to spend time on. Harmonious passion is defined as a motivation to engage in an activity while still being able to accommodate it into your everyday life. It's basically something you enjoy doing but doesn't take over every aspect of your life or stop you from doing other things you want to do. Obsessive passion, meanwhile, refers to an uncontrollable urge to engage in an activity that the person deems to be important. Unlike with harmonious passion, people with an obsessive passion are compelled to partake in this activity even at the cost of other areas in their life. Terms like these, though not perfect, are helpful for us to have clearer dialogues of communication when we speak about the benefits or dangers of gaming. Most people that I know as friends or members of my gaming community have what I would classify as a harmonious relationship with gaming. They enjoy the activity and enjoy spending lots of time on it, but it does not take over their life. They still have jobs and other passions and dreams of progress in other fields which they are actively working towards or currently doing. Most of them have no problem turning off the video game when it's no longer fun or when they have more important things to do. However, it would be a lie to say that there aren't also people who have an obsessive relationship with gaming. They game at an unhealthy level, throwing their life into it without consideration for other aspects of their well-being, and also quite often gaming in such an obsessive way that they cease to gain even much joy from the activity of playing itself. We all may know someone like this. Some of us might feel that we are like this. When we talk about the negative aspects of gaming, this is what we really should be referring to, because these are the people who are really suffering from them, not the kid playing Angry Birds on their phone. This particular study found that harmonious passion for gaming positively correlates with life satisfaction and self-realization, while obsessive passion is unrelated to life satisfaction and negatively predicts self-realization. So what does that mean? Well, to put it in simple terms, it means that when you have a harmonious relationship with gaming, that being a balanced one where it doesn't take over your life, you're more likely to be happier with your life itself, and you're also likely to become the best version of yourself. You're more likely to achieve goals you want to achieve and fulfill your potential. We've seen from the studies I listed earlier on the various benefits of gaming why this might be the case. But if you have an obsessive passion for gaming, one where you can't stop playing even when you should be doing other things that are essential to your life, then you're going down a dark path. An obsessive passion was shown to have no correlation with life satisfaction, which means that, as I said above, a lot of the people playing like this tend to not even get the basic joy from gaming itself. Like many addicts, they engage in this act because they feel compelled to, but they're not getting anything from it. And more worryingly, a relationship like this makes it less likely that you do fulfill your goals, and you're very likely to end up wasting your potential. When something becomes an obsession, as described in this model, it actively hinders your life and your progress. And that's something nobody wants to see. So this is where I think we need to update our understanding of the whole situation and shift our mental perspective on the activity of gaming. Gaming is not a danger, certainly not in of itself. In fact, it is arguably a very mentally active and engaging way of enjoying your free time. It has several cognitive benefits, it's inspirational, it provides great opportunities for social growth, and it can be one ingredient towards leading a healthy lifestyle. But nothing works in isolation. It will not provide you with the physical benefits that you also need in life. Exercise, a good diet. These are things that gaming cannot provide you, barring a few exceptions. These are things that are your responsibility to seek to incorporate into your life. If you are still able to do this, you're very likely engaging in what is known as a harmonious passion for gaming. You're still able to enjoy the activity while maintaining a healthy balance with your life. This is the relationship most people have with gaming, and it is what we should aim for. It is, for all intents and purposes, the norm. However, as critics will be keen to tell you, it can sometimes go too far. Passion can stray into obsession, and when it gets to that point, when gaming is stopping you from conducting your life to its fullest and actively hindering you from realizing your self-worth, that is when it becomes a problem, much like any addiction or unhealthy relationship would do. Any of us who love and enjoy video games should be mindful of both realities, and do our best to encourage others to see the benefits and the joys of gaming that it has no doubt brought to us. I hope with this video to be able to do the same. But we must equally make sure that those around us and in our communities do not stray into unhealthy habits and lifestyles. We must look out for each other. And hopefully, as we do this, we can update the understanding of the general populace so that they also realize that, actually, video games are pretty wonderful. And all things considered, gaming is pretty good for you.
I'm surprised to admit it, but I can accept that.
And that's all I got for today, guys. Hope you found this video helpful, and I hope it articulates some of the things that many of you will want to say when you're faced with criticisms of gaming. I wouldn't want anyone to just take my word for anything though, so I encourage you to do some research for yourself if you're interested in this topic. And if you have anything you want to share with me, please do so in the comments below. I've linked every study I've spoken about in the description, and some I didn't have the time to mention. It took me a long time to make this video and a copious amount of research, so if you would like to help me keep making videos like this one, then please do consider signing up to my Patreon. I would actually love to have a second channel dedicated entirely to video essays like this, on topics ranging from movies to games to general everyday things. But like I said, they take a lot of time, and that's just not possible for me right now with the amount of income I currently make from content creation. So if you can help, it would go a long way. As always, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons and my Twitch subs who do the awesome job of currently supporting me, and I'd like to shout out in particular Unheard, Mark Matthews, Mad Scientist, Riddle Me Bats, and 21, who are my newest high tier patrons. For those of you who don't know, I stream every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on Twitch and Sundays on YouTube, and you can check my timings and links in the video description as well. But that's it for me. I'll be back before you know it with another video. See you guys soon.